Session is resumed. Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Sir President, I rise on a question of personal and collective privilege, and with the permission of the Senate President and our colleagues, I ask permission to use the projector and some slides.
Go ahead, sir.
Sir President, may I start with a quote from Proverbs 29, verse 1 and 2. He who is often rebuked and hardened his neck will suddenly be destroyed and without remedy. Yung pong pinagsabihan na, pero napakatigas ng ulo at ayaw magbago, ay gigibain at wala nang magagawa. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked bears rule, the people mourn. Sir President, just like all of our colleagues here, we are human. As politicians, we have our constituents, we have our experts, we have our staff. Can we go to the next slide? I had a secret weapon. The person in the picture is Pastor Doy Castillo. He was our pastor, a second father. The picture on the left was the picture after the sauna. Humabol siya sa dinner namin just to make sure that I was okay. At pinagpipilitan niya na mag-picture kami to show the other pastors in his group na okay lang ako. Kaya sabi ko sa kanya, Pastor, ano na lang, photobomber na lang ako to show that I fully support Senate President Aquilino Pimentel. Coco, it was a friendly fight and I'm ready to do my duties for the country. But a few days ago, sa kanan po, bigla siyang binawian ng buhay. And the relevance po of all of this is that he was so practical, but so idealistic, that when we had problems like extrajudicial killings versus drugs, corruption versus efficiency, natatakbuhan ko po siya at nakakausap. So today, I turn to you, my colleagues, and I turn to you, our people, for advice. Medyo po kasi full supporter ako nung drugs sa war, pero naapektuhan din po ako sa nababasa ko sa Time Magazine, sa South China Post, sa Facebook, sa mga pinapadala sa atin at sa mga upakan. At lalo po akong naapektuhan sa mga pulis na napatay at ang kanilang mga byuda ang napapanood po sa Senado ay yung mga pong pamilya ng mga nasa drugs ang nagte-testify dito. So, let me start with the facts in asking for some advice. And, Mr. President, my colleagues, allow me na parang kwentuhan lang ba? Na nasa isang sulok tayo, nag-uusap, at ito po ang aking pananaw sa nangyayari. Una po, sa akin, it's a fact that the drug menace is a national security threat and has destroyed millions of lives of Filipino families for the past decades. Wala pong isang presidente, wala pong isang politiko, isang administrasyon may kasalanan nito. Ito ay worldwide phenomenon ang droga. We have had people here like Senator Soto, who has made it in main advocacy since he was vice mayor, and many others here. No? The international and local drug syndicates have plagued the communities and threatened our personal security. Wala pong sense of security ang Pilipino dati. Pagka may kwintas, may cellphone, hindi mo pwede ilabas sa jeep, baka manakaw. Pagkakuha ng sweldo, hindi ka makadiretso sa paglabas at kukunin mo sweldo sa ATM, hindi pwede sa gabi, baka manakawang ka. Uwi ka ng gabi, baka bastusin ka, rapin ka, kukunin mo kotse mo, papatayin ka pa, no? We value the sanctity of life. We are a religious people, Mr. President. Christian, Muslims, whatever religion, importante ang buhay. Our war against illegal drugs is not a war against life, but a war to fight for the lives of all Filipinos. It is not a war against human rights, but a war to protect the human rights and to ensure the safety and welfare of the Filipino family. Mr. President, makikita mo sa susunod na slide, example lang to ng sipag ng ating Philippine media, no? Ito po ay isa sa Philippine Star na kung saan high sa shabu ng rape po ng 7 years old. No one in their normal state of mind, kahit na criminal po yung mind na yon, kahit malaswa yung kanyang isipan, ang mangre-rape po ng 7 years old. Next po, can we watch the short video from Action TV5?
You were from my past life. Hope you're doing well, bro.
Sumuko na ang suspect sa pagpatay sa isang nurse sa Quezon City noong Sabado. Bukod sa lasing, nagpositibo rin ang suspect sa pinagbabawal na gamot. Umaksyon si Renzo Tico.
Humingi po ako lahat po sa kamag-anak, sa magulang. Hindi ko po talaga intention na patayin po siya.
Napaiyak si Jeffrey Guarin nang iharap sa mga miyembro ng media sa Karingal. Si Guarin ang sospek sa pagpatay sa 24 anyos na nurse na si September Paz sa Barangay Cristong Hari sa Quezon City. Sabado na matagpuan si Paz na may 19 na saksak sa katawan. Pero giit ni Guarin, hindi niya sinasadya ang nangyari.
Wala pa akong balak na patayin po siya. Balak ko lang po talaga kumuha ang pera.
Lasing daw noon si Guarin at nabitin sa inuman, kaya naisipang magnakaw para magkaroon ng pambili ng alak. Pero nahuli siya ni Paz, kaya nasaksak ang biktima ni Guarin. Sa drug test naman na isinagawa sa suspect, positibo ang resulta. Sumuko na rin noon si Guarin sa Oplan tukhang ng QCPD, pero ayon sa suspect, matagal na siyang tumigil.
Ewan ko rin siya mabiktima. Hindi lang siya napabalitaan.
Nakonsensya raw si Guarin sa pagpatay sa nurse, kaya kahapon, sumuko na siya sa kanilang barangay kagawad. Maharap siya sa kasong murder. Ang mga kaanak naman ng biktima na nakaburol sa Sarat, Ilocos Norte, may mensahe sa mga tutol sa anti-drug campaign ng pamahalaan.
Lahat po ng mga politiko dyan na nagpoprotesta sa mga ginagawa ng mga nagpapatupad sa ating batas, mag-isip-isip naman kayo. Sana po hindi kayo mabiktima, kagaya namin.
Umaaksyon Renz Ongkiko, News 5.
Sir President, if you look at the next slide, you will see that there was a 92% increase of number of recorded cases of rape from 2010 to 2014, and 200% increase on violations of the anti-violence against women and children. And to be fair to the past administration, if you go back, Arroyo administration, Estrada administration, Ramos administration, etc., patas ng patas eh. 40% yan dahil sa droga. Next slide. Even the Supreme Court, and I commend the Supreme Court, saw the problem, kaya po nag-create siya ng 240 additional trial courts nationwide to handle cases involving the Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002. Next slide. So the question is, Mr. President, tanong po natin sa bawat isa, how do we solve the problem? Pero po may bago tayong Pangulo. At siya po ang unang-unang dapat sumagot nito. So we ask ourselves, what is the Duterte administration policy? Let's view the President and let him answer it himself.
During my inauguration last 2016, I said that the fight against criminality and illegal drugs and corruption will be relentless and sustained. I reiterate that commitment today, and that is why I call on the Philippine National Police, the barangay chairman, the mayors and governors, are all those occupying seats of power and authority not to lower their guard. There will be no let up in this campaign. Double your efforts, triple them if need be. We will not stop until the last drug lord, the last financier, and the last pusher have surrendered or put behind bars. Or below the ground, if they so wish. To our police officers and other officials, do your job, and you will have the unwavering support of the Office of the President. I will be with you all the way. Abuse your authority, and there will be a hell to pay. For you will have become worse than criminality itself. I order the National Police Commission to hasten the conduct of investigation and adjudication of administrative cases against police officers involved in criminal activity and illegal activities.
Sir President, malinaw na ang policy ng President all out against drugs. Sabi niya, double, triple your effort, pero sinabi po niya, ikukulong lilitisin. Choice ng drug lord or nagbebenta kung gusto niya siyang buhay o patay. Bakit po? Pag lumaban siya at papatayin niya pulis, kung ikaw ba pulis, ibibigay mo buhay mo sa drug lord? Sa bansa, yes. Pero sa drug lord, hindi. Kaya marami nagsasabi at nababasa ko sa mga pahayagan, nakikita ko po sa telebisyon, sabi, si Mr. President naman, ang bukang bibig, patayin na lahat yan. Kill them all. Again, Mr. President, what is the Duterte administration's policy on drugs and criminality? Before I show you the next video, nagtanong po ako, and you can bear me out, Mr. President, Senate President Pimentel, dahil during the campaign, madalas ko marinig, yung mga drogista, pag ayaw tumigil, patayin. Sa amin kasi mga Tagalog, ang drogista is yung addict. Nung tinanong ko yung iba sa Davao, sabi, boss, yung iba kasi dito, ang pagkaintindi ng drogista, yung addict na nagbebenta. No? So yung pusher din. So ano ang policy ng ating Pangulo sa pusher at sa user? Can we view the next video? Can we dim the lights?
We will create an interagency committee on illegal drugs that will integrate efforts and strengthen the partnerships of all stakeholders. The reservists will be mobilized for information campaign against drug use and dissemination of information regarding drug rehabilitation program being offered by the government. Let us also strengthen our ROTC program to instill love of country and good citizenship. We will also prioritize the rehabilitation of drug users. We will increase the number of residential treatment and rehabilitation facilities in all regions of the country. The armed forces of the Philippines will facilitate the preparation for the use of military camps and facilities for drug rehabilitation.
Sir President, malinaw. Sa mga addict, ang gusto ng Presidente, rehabilitation. Nabasa nga natin sa dyaryo na si Mr. Ramon Ang ng San Miguel Corporation ay magbibigay nga ng 1 bilyon para nga po gumawa ng mga rehab center para walang gastos ang gobyerno. Ang balita ko po, ang mga TAN ng Mega World ay nakipag-meeting na rin at marami pang ibang negosyante sa DILG Secretary Sueño para kung saan-saan kampo ng pulis at PNP maglagay ng rehab centers. So yung pinapalabas, napapatayin lahat, malinaw na po na hindi nanggagaling sa ating Pangulo. So the next question, Mr. President, are we or are some people using the terms extrajudicial killings loosely? Not because they are human rights advocates, kasi we respect the human rights advocates. Kailangan natin sila. Pero yung iba, na drug lords na gustong siraan ng Pangulo o gustong tuloy ang kanilang negosyo, yung iba na politika na hindi matanggap na meron tayong Pangulo na katulad ni President Duterte, are they loosely using the word extrajudicial killing to discredit the PNP and the Duterte administration? Sa resolution pa lang po ng ating kasama na si Senator Leila De Lima, makikita niyo po the recent rampant extrajudicial killings and summary killings of suspected criminals. I reviewed po, marami sa atin nilalagay ng alleged kasi iniimbestigahan mo pa lang eh. Pero sa kanya po, siya mag-chair, siya nangunguna sa hearing, pero hindi lang sa papel na to, pero sa maraming interview, hindi niya tatanggapin na hindi ito summary killing or extrajudicial killing. Next slide. This effort to discredit the president has reached the international news. In fact, dahil walang suporta dito sa ating bansa, of course, nire-report, kailangan gawin ng ating mga kapatid sa media, pero people feel safe eh. Nararamdaman ng taong pagbabago eh. Dati ang takot tao, ang hindi takot, kriminal. Ngayon ang kriminal takot, ang tao, ang mamamayan, hindi po takot. They feel safe, or at least they're beginning to feel safe. Kaya kung makikita nyo po yan, Time Magazine, yung pong South China Sea Post, grabe po ang mga article at pinapalabas po yung nangyayari sa ating bansa, parang Wild Wild West, parang kahit sino pwede patayin. Ang difference lang po dyan sa Huffington Post, kasi po yung isang nakatira doon sa ibang bansa, hindi na makapagpigil, ipinaliwanag niya na iba ang nangyayari sa Pilipinas at iba ang nire-report sa ibang bansa. Next slide. Tingnan po natin yung interview kagabi po sa ating pong kasamahan na si Senator De Lima.
The president and his supporters say that there just as many people were killed under the Arroyo and Aquino administrations. Is that true?
That is not true. If Senator Cayetano refers to both the Arroyo and Aquino administration, then we're looking at a period of more than 10 years. That's 9 years of Arroyo and 6 years of that.
The president and his supporters say that there just as many people were killed under the Arroyo and Aquino administrations. Is that true?
That is not true. If Senator Cayetano refers to both the Arroyo and Aquino administration, then we're looking at a period of more than 10 years. That's 9 years of Arroyo and 6 years of Aquino. And then we have 2 months of the Duterte administration, and there are a little over 2,000 already killed in the name of this war against drugs.
Let me play.
Mr. President, hindi po sana ako ma-offend na sinisiraan tayo internationally, or hindi ko sasabihin sana na minimislead ni Senator De Lima ang international community, ang publiko sa numero, kung hindi tayo nagkaroon ng hearing. Sa hearing po, hindi ko po pinagsama yung 9 years at 6 years. In-average ko po monthly. And Mr. President, narinig nyo sa sarili niyang bibig, sabi niya 2,000 na daw ang patay sa pangalan ng drug war. Bakit po? Kasi po lahat ng patay, sinasama po niya at charged to Duterte. Para bang sa isang restaurant po, na isa lang ang mesa ng Pangulo, pero lahat po nung nasa restaurant ay sumigaw ng Duterte, Duterte, kaya ibibigay yung resibo sa presidente, siya na magbabayad sa lahat. Bakit po ganon? 2,000. Nireport naman po ng ating PNP kung ilan, less than 800 po at that time, ang patay because of legitimate PNP or law enforcement operation. Kung may tanong kung legitimate yung iba, that's fair. Pero po yung 2,000, so kahit sino na lang po napatay dahil may love triangle, patay po dahil away sa weteng, away sa utang, patay po dahil nagpustahan sa basketball, at ilagay lang po ng karatula, drug war, charge na po kay Duterte at sa drug war yan. Next slide, please. Tignan po natin para hindi tayo malito lahat. Sa bibig na po mismo ng dalawa pong nangunguna sa investigasyon na to, kung ano ba talaga ang definition ng extrajudicial killing. Kasi po, baka tayo nagkakalituhan sa definition.
Importante nga po talaga na linawin kung ano yung sakop ng extrajudicial killings. At ang sigurong pwede nating paghugutan nito ay yung report ng Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Killings, si Philip Alston, nung siya ay bumisita dito. May 10 taon ang nakaraan. Ang sabi po ni Philip Alston sa kanyang report ay ang extrajudicial killing ay any killing by government forces as well as the killing by any other groups or individuals which the government failed to investigate, prosecute, and punish when it is in a position to do so.
Tama, Mr. President, sabi niya, hinugot niya kay Philip Alston yung kanyang definition. Talagang itong kaibigan natin na si Chairman Gascon may pinaghuhugutan talaga. Kaya talagang galit na galit sa ating Pangulo. The reality is there was neither the same number or even more. The reality, Mr. President, or ang katotohanan, there is the same number of murder or homicides or even less in a monthly average during the Arroyo Aquino and the Duterte time. Ulitin ko po, kung ang patay ngayon 2,000 sa isang buwan, 2 buwan, that's 1,000 a month, ganun din po nung panahon ni Presidente Aquino. 1,000 mahigit ang patay buwan-buwan. Pero dahil mas mabait magsalita ang ating dating Pangulo, mas politically correct, wala sa front page at wala po sa mga pahayagan around the world kung ilan ang patay. Pero ngayon po, lahat ng patay, para bang ang Pangulo natin may-ari ng lahat ng punerarya sa ating bansa, charge parati po lahat kay President Duterte. Let's look at the figures. Sir President, sa ibabaw galing sa PNP, 2010, 12,352 patay. Hindi po ordinary yan na patay po. Homicide at saka murder. 2013, at the peak, 16,160. Yan po ang source po niyan, PNP. Sa ibaba po, baka sabihin nyo, baka dinoktor ng PNP. PSA, sa Philippine Statistics Authority po, 2010, 12,622. 2013, 15,481. 2015, 12,478. May konting discrepancy pero magkakadikit. Siguro po, baka sa NSO natin makikita sa death certificate kung sakali kung ano ang pinaka-accurate. But what's my point, Mr. President? An average of 35 to 45 deaths a day. Ang kaibahan po, nung araw, ang napapatay, ang mga biktima ng drugista. Hindi lang po death, murder and homicide. Ang na-murder, ang napapatay by a crime, yung po mga inosente. Ngayon po, yung 700 sa legitimate PNP operations, ito po mga pusher. Yung sa labas po ng legitimate, hindi ko po alam. At tingin ko po, wala sa kwarto to makakaalam. Yung pumatay po ba dyan ay kapwa drug lord? Kasi baka magkumanta na at ayaw din magpahuli. Yung po ba ay love triangle? Yung po ba ay utang? Yung po ba ay sabog lang? Kaya nag-away? Next slide, please. Pero kung makikita nyo po, nung Aquino administration, naglabas po ng AO Order 35, Administrative Order 35. Dinefine po nila kung ano ang extrajudicial killing. Next slide po. Makikita nyo po na sinabi dito, for the purpose of the focused mandate of AO 35, killings related to common crimes and or the perpetration of their crimes shall be addressed by other appropriate mechanisms within the justice system. So to be convenient during the Aquino administration, pag ordinary crimes, pag droga, ay hindi kasama sa extrajudicial killings yan. Pero pagdating sa Duterte, ba, kapag ka-droga, kasama yan. Next slide. Ayan po mismo, sa kanilang sariling definition. The victims were members of affiliated with an organization to include political, environmental, agrarian, labor, similar cases, an advocate of the above, media practitioner. In other words, Mr. President, ikaw po ay member ng cause-oriented group. Aktivista ka against coal, against mining, aktivista ka na journalist, investigative journalist ka, no? Pag may nangyari sa'yo at napatay ka, diyan ka babaksak. But let me ask our journalists today, let me ask our labor activists, our environmental activists, don't you feel safer today than 6 years ago? Next slide. Yan po ang pinapakita ng Aquino administration or ni Senator De Lima abroad sa report nila na total 394 lang ang extrajudicial killing sa panahon nila. Bakit po? Iniba nila yung definition eh. Pag sila naglaro, ang gusto nila, rules ng volleyball. Pag tayo naglaro, rules ng basketball. Tapos, banat ng banat, ang problema, Mr. President, mga kababayan, our colleagues, kung ang Pangulo lang po ang nasisira, I let him speak for himself. Ang problema po, isa tayo sa kulela pagdating sa turismo eh. Nagwo-work hard ang Department of Tourism, nagwo-work hard po ang iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno, dumami ang turista, tapos palalabasin po natin sa ibang bansa na hindi safe sa atin, na grabe ang patayan. Samantalang ang mga OFWs mismo ang nagsasabi na mas safe na ngayon ang kanilang pamilya. So I have a question to Mr. Gascon, Chairman Gascon. Why are you destroying the image of the Philippines? Why are you inviting trade sanctions from the EU? Hindi po ako anti-Aquino. Hindi po ako galit sa dilaw as a general rule. Some of my best friends are members of the Liberal Party. My seatmates are members of the Liberal Party. We've worked together in important bills. We recognize the contribution of President Benigno, or Pinoy, as he wants to be called, on our economy. But Mr. Gascon, nagagawa mo naman trabaho mo dito, i-involve mo pa EU, European Union. Ano po sabi niya? The GSP Plus system is anchored and based almost fully and significantly in compliance with certain international standards. Human rights standards, labor standards, and environmental standards. Question, Mr. Gascon. Sa environment muna, yung mga power plant, lalo yung coal, yung mga minahan, hindi ba mas mahigpit ngayon sa Duterte administration? To the point na yung mga kapitalista, ang mga may-ari ng kumpanya ay nagsasabi na nga na ridiculous na, masyado na mahigpit, mas mahigpit pa sa pinakamahigpit na world standard. So, sa environmental, better tayo. Labor standards, nag-hearing na kaagad si Senator Joel Villanueva pagdating sa contractualization sa ENDO. Ang civil service po, nagsalita na kahapon sa contractualization sa gobyerno. Ang ating pong Pangulo at ating Labor Secretary Bello, kumilos kaagad. So 2 out of 3, labor, environmental, wag mo naman sabihin hindi tayo mas magaling. So dapat siguro, sinabi ni Mr. Gascon, EU, increase trade with the Philippines. Pero anong pinukol niya po? Human rights standards. Now, let me now test whether tama o mali yung sinabi po ni Mr. Gascon. Next slide. Ito po, extrajudicial killings remains biggest rights problem under Aquino. It's the US report. But I did not blame President Aquino. I supported him. Hindi madali to get rid of extrajudicial killings, killings ng media. Di ba? Next slide. Interagency body, Human Rights Watch, said the same thing. I did not criticize President Aquino. I supported him because I saw he was moving in the judiciary, in the DOJ, etc., to address all of this. Si Mr. Gascon ba nagsalita nung panahon na yan? Sinabi ba niya, EU, pigilan nyo yung ibang trade with President Aquino? O, yung upgrade, wag muna kasi may problema sa human rights. Hindi po, tahimik siya nun. Pero Mr. President, ano po ba talaga ang nakalagay sa International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights? Ito po nakalagay. Every human being has the inherent right to life. May karapatan po mabuhay ang bawat tao. The right shall be protected by law. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his life. Underlined, arbitrarily. Bakit po? Next slide. Ito po ang dinidiscuss po ng mga experts on human rights at ipropropose po nila dito sa convention na yung definition ng arbitrary. Although it inheres in every human being by virtue of membership in the human family, the right to life is not absolute. By requiring the deprivations of life must not be arbitrary in nature. Article 6, paragraph 1 implicitly recognizes that some deprivations of life may be justified in some cases. Minsan po may dahilan kung bakit kukunin ang isang buhay. Ano po yung example? Use of lethal force against a person who poses an immediate threat to the lives of others when no other less harmful means of protection are or could have been available does not prima facie constitute an arbitrary deprivation of life. Ibig sabihin po, police, na makikipagbarilan po sa isang drug lord. Mamimili siya buhay niya o buhay ng drug lord. Siyempre, pipiliin niya buhay niya. At yan po ay hindi violation ng Article 6 Right of Life sa International Convention. Next slide. Sir President, I also want to take note of this because this will be discussed, I think, next month in the conventions. And this has been, ito po ay diniscuss for the last, is it 10 or 20 years. All human rights are universal, indivisible, and interdependent and interrelated. Ibig sabihin po, puti ka man, itim, kayo manggi, ikaw po man ay in-check, Hapon, Pilipino, Amerikano, may karapatan ka sa buhay. Ngunit, the international community must treat human rights globally in a fair and equal manner, on the same footing, and with the same emphasis. While the significance of national and regional particularities and various historical, cultural, and religious backgrounds must be borne in mind. It is the duty of the states, regardless of their political, economic, and cultural systems, to promote and protect all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Ang parati pong nagbabanggit niyan, Singapore. Singapore po, grabe po ang peace and order. Grabe po ang katahimikan sa droga. Pero parati silang tinutulig sa human rights. Pero sabi po nila, we're Asians. Iba kultura namin. Kasi po, sa ibang bansa, sa ibang mundo, recreational yung ibang drugs eh. Iba din ang droga na gamit nila. I won't go into that discussion right now, Mr. President. Ang ibig ko lang po sabihin, wag naman tayo husgahan ng ibang bansa sa kanilang kultura. Kasi meron tayong sarili nating kultura, sarili nating paniniwala. Ngunit kasama sa ating paniniwala, the sanctity of life. Next slide. Dati po, ang tao ang takot. Ang kriminal hindi. Dati po, ang kriminal may barel kahit saan pwede pumasok, kahit saan pwede pumunta. Ang tao, hindi pwede sa madilim, sa gabi, ingat, pag nakasakay ng jeep, pag nagko-commute, tago yung mga valuables. Ngayon po, nagbago na. Ang mga kriminal ang takot, and people are beginning to feel safe. Next slide. Why are we accusing the Duterte administration for being responsible for extrajudicial killings? Si Duterte ba't ang kanyang administrasyon ang may kasalanan sa lahat ng patayan? First point, there is equal number, if not less, na patay ngayon. Next slide. Let us ask the two again kung sino ang nasisisi.
Human rights defenders and environmentalists, his definition actually covers the scenario that we are currently facing as well. The key component is that we should show that the state is doing everything it can to prevent this phenomenon from becoming a practice.
Okay, 2 points, Mr. President. Unang-una, bago nagsalita si Chairman Gascon noon, lahat ng witness ay nagsabi na ang kanilang kaso ay iniimbestigahan. In fact, yung unang witness, kinasuhan na ng murder ang 2 pulis. So sa sariling definition ni Mr. Gascon, failed to investigate, prosecute, and punish. Paano na-fail? Iniimbestigahan na nga ng CHR. Iniimbestigahan na nga ng pulis. Facing murder na nga at iniimbestigahan ng Senado. Pero ano sabi ni Mr. Gascon? Kasama daw sa definisyon yung nangyayari ngayon. Failed to prosecute and punish. Mr. Gascon, and to our colleagues, malabo naman ata yun. Ang kinote nila, ayan, no, extrajudicial killing is any killing by government forces as well as the killing by any other groups or individual which the government failed to investigate, prosecute, and punish. Hindi po yan nangyayari ngayon. Next slide, please. Pakinggan po natin ang ating Pangulo. Ano ang kanyang policy pagdating po sa pag-iimbestiga at pang-aabuso po ng pulis?
To our police officers and other officials, do your job, and you will have the unwavering support of the Office of the President. I will be with you all the way. Abuse your authority, and there will be a hell to pay. For you will have become worse than criminality itself. I order the National Police Commission to hasten the conduct of investigation and adjudication of administrative cases against police officers involved in criminal activity and illegal activities, and prescribe policies on lifestyle checks for PNP members. In this quest, I will put at stake my honor, my life, and the presidency itself. The DLG is also directed to strictly monitor how LGUs perform their supervision functions over the police, and those found that performing will be sanctioned, including the loss of police deputation from the NAPOLCOM. Let me repeat my warning to all. I repeat my repeat to all. Do not do drugs. Because you will be the solution to the drug crisis that has engulfed malawak the nation.
Mr. President, malinaw, sabi ng Pangulo, monitor, LGU, PNP. Ang LGU hindi kasama po ng PNP yan, pwede magsumbong. Sinabi po niya sa mga pulis, hindi pwedeng may abuso. Sinabi niya, he will stake his honor. Hindi lang sa mga lalabanan sa droga, pati yung umabuso ng mga pulis. Because the President is not only anti-drugs, he is for law and order. In fact, earlier on, the PNP issued a memorandum saying na yung mga vigilante killings ay hindi nila pinapayagan at lahat ng report of vigilante killings kailangan 7 days meron pong investigasyon at report. So, Mr. Gascon, saan yung sinasabi mong hindi pinapansin, hindi iniimbestigahan, hindi pinoprosecute? Next. Even the Supreme Court, dahil nabahala na rin sila at marami tayong kagalang-galang na mga justices, na mga human rights advocates, nagpapasalamat kami sa kanila sa kanilang pag-form ng human rights violation ng isang body to look into human rights violations. Bakit po? Next slide. Because under the Alston definition, De Lima and Gascon's definition, the question has to be asked, are these deaths extrajudicial killings? Next slide. The answer is a big no. And that's why we thank the Supreme Court, because they are part of the state. Pag sinabi ni Mr. Gascon, Chairman Gascon, Chairperson Gascon, at sinabi ni Senator De Lima that the state is not investigating, prosecuting, kasama tayo doon, Mr. President. Duterte is not the state. The presidency is not the state. We are a presidential form of government. There are checks and balances. Pag may problema yung executive, nandyan yung legislative, nandyan yung judiciary. Kaya nga may impeachment eh. Kaya nga merong kasuhan, may prosecution, kaya nga may ombudsman. Ayan po. The state includes all of us. Executive, legislative, judiciary, CHR, kasama po yan. Next slide. There is no national outrage regarding the drug war. Bakit po? Eh, alam naman po na ang tinatarget po talaga ang nagbebenta ng droga eh. Hindi naman tinatarget ang inosente at alam naman po na yung mga sumurrender are treated humanely. But there is an international effort to discredit the Duterte administration. Makikita niyo po ang statement ni Senator De Lima. Killings may lead to charges of crimes against humanity. Ang bigat naman. Isasama mo si Duterte, crimes against humanity. Yung mga kinakasuhan dyan, mga madmen eh. na kinakasuhan dyan, genocide. Pero ganyan po ang statement niya while she is chairing a hearing and saying that she can be neutral. How can you be neutral, Mr. President, pag yan na sinabi mo? Pero Mr. President, tanong muna, why are we involving the ICC in the drug war in the Philippines? International Criminal Court. Gusto nyo ba na ang Pangulo mahati ang atensyon? Kaso niya abroad at yung drug na problema dito? Gusto ba natin itigil ang laban sa droga? But a second question, Mr. President. Kasi akala nung iba, ang ICC, parang MTC, RTC, CA, Supreme Court, Sandigan Bayan. Hindi po. Tignan po natin ang rules ng international ng ICC. The case is being investigated or prosecuted by a state which has jurisdiction over it unless the state is one willing or unable to genuinely carry out the investigation or prosecution. Rome Statute Article 7-A, issue of admissibility. Alam po ng lahat ng abogado, pag hindi admissible, hindi tatanggapin, part ng jurisdiction po. Sinabi na po sa rules mismo ng ICC, kapag yung estado na yon ay pinaparusahan po niya ang extrajudicial killing sa kanyang bansa, hindi mo pwedeng dalhin sa ICC because it is not state-sponsored. Ang pinapalabas ng marami dito, state-sponsored ang ginagawa po na extrajudicial killings. Or that all of these are extrajudicial killings. Do you want to try the President in the International Criminal Court? Next slide, please. But let's remember that not all alleged extrajudicial killings cases are admissible in the ICC because, next slide, the case has been investigated by a state which has jurisdiction over it, and the state has decided not to prosecute the person concerned unless the decision resulted from the unwillingness or inability of the state to genuinely prosecute. Article 17B, issue of admissibility. Dapat nga dito yung estado mismo nagsabi, ayoko i-prosecute yan. Dito nga, pino-prosecute natin At pinakita natin, kumikilos ang DILG, kumikilos ang PNP, ang Senado kumikilos Mas marami pang ang hearing yon. Kaso sa iba pang mga hearing sa ibang committee. Do we really disregard, Mr. President, do we disregard human rights? What is the Duterte administration policy on human rights? Again, Mr. President, let's hear the President. Let's hear it from his mouth.
My administration shall implement a human approach to development and governance as we improve our people's welfare in the areas of health, education, adequate food and housing, environmental preservation, and respect for culture. Human rights must work to uplift human dignity. But human rights cannot be used as a shield or an excuse to destroy the country. Your country, I am my country.
Sir President, narinig po natin sa sariling bibig ng ating Pangulo na ang human rights ay importante sa ating bansa. Pero hindi pwedeng gamitin yung human rights para hindi ituloy ang drug war. Hindi rin pwedeng abusuhin ang human rights. But let me play the advocate. Total, humingi ako ng advice sa inyo at sa ating mga kababayan. Pero sabihin nyo, Sir President, Kuya Allan, narinig ko sinabi ng Pangulo yan human rights na yan, wala yan. Well, let me ask you, sino sa atin ang hindi nakarinig sa teacher natin, sa boss natin, I will accept no excuses. Today's exam or today's requirement, no excuses. Kung namatayan ka sa pamilya mo, kung nasa ospital ka, at lumapit ka sa teacher mo at sabihin mo, Ma'am, pasensya na, alam ko no excuses, pero kadextrose po ako, unconscious ako, hindi ako makapunte. Hindi ba tatanggapin yung excuse na yon? In other words, it is a hyperbole or it is a manner of speaking If you look at all of the speeches, especially the policy speeches of the President, parati niyang sinabi, we will operate within the confines of the Philippine Constitution. We will respect the Bill of Rights, the rule of law. In fact, ang hinahanap lang ng ating Pangulo, yung nangyayari sa Singapore. People love the law, but people fear the law. People know that the law will protect them, but people know that they have to follow the law. Ang hinahanap lang ng Pangulo natin, mayaman, mahirap, kriminal, hindi, Bisaya, Ilocano, Ilonggo, Kapampangan, kung ano man ang pagkakaiba natin, lalaki, babae, LGBT, may isang batas, hindi nagdi-discriminate, at sinusunod natin lahat. Hindi katulad ng nangyayari dati, pag drug lord ka. You're above the law. No? And there's only one Lord. There shouldn't be drug lords. Mr. President, in ending my conversation with the people and with you, I have an appeal. Pag-isipan natin na mabuti kung dapat ang nag-chair ng isang committee sa hearing, I'm not questioning the chairmanship of the Committee on Human Rights and Justice and Human Rights. Pero sa hearing na yon, kung ikaw ay advocate, kung ikaw ay decided na, paano mo mabibigyan ng tsansa yung kabilang side? Nakita nyo po yung pinilang witness panay pamilya po ng mga napatayan na nasa droga. Hindi naman po pinila yung mga witnesses ng mga pamilya naman ng mga polis na napatayan. Nakita naman po natin na kapag ang PNP ang magsasalita, may time limit. Pero pag ang magsasalita po ay yung pamilya ng mga nagbebenta ng droga, walang time limit. Nakita po natin sa mga interview. Mr. President, Senator Gordon here was chairman of the Blue Ribbon Committee. I was chairman of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Many here chaired committees in aid of legislation. But when we are the chairman, we are neutral. We can make certain statements, but we are the judges. So we allow the others to either defend or prosecute in a manner of speaking, to be the advocate. So that's the first question I want to throw to the body. No? Paano po mangyayari na sa isip po ng chairman or ni Senator De Lima, guilty na po ang administrasyon? Paano mabibigyan ng fair na hearing ito? Pangalawa po, kahit sabihin po natin legislative, fact-finding to No? Pangalawa po, ang balita ko po, nag-schedule ng hearing ng September 5. Ano po ba ang ating adhikain dito? Na malaman ang totoo, maprotektahan ang karapatang pantao, human rights, o mapahiya ang Pangulo? Tanungin niyo po sa kahit anong diplomat. Tanungin niyo po sa kahit anong bansa. Kapag may international conference, lalo na po kapag ka po head of states ang magkikita-kita, o kahit na state visit po, ang mga oposisyon sa isang bansa ay nananahimik muna dahil hindi po sila oposisyon sa kanilang sariling bansa. Oposisyon sila sa administrasyon. Tignan niyo po ako, first 3 years, 2010 to 2013, minority leader po ako dito. Paminsan-minsan po tinutuligsa ko si President Aquino. Pero pag may state visit po siya, either tahimik na lang muna ako o pinupuri ko. Bakit? Because he's representing the country. So meron po tayong international gathering. Heads of state ang kasama ng Pangulo next week. Tapos sasabayan natin ang hearing na ganito at pipilahan yun ng witnesses ng mga kamag-anak ng pushers. Of course, may karapatan din sila. And of course, we have to hear them. But Mr. President, isasabay natin na sa dyaryo mukhang meron pong meeting si President Obama at ating Pangulo. He'll be meeting other prime ministers and other presidents. And then tayo mag-hearing dito. And we'll make it appear that this is a Duterte orchestrated madman type of killing everyone, killing all involved in drugs in our country. I know in the Senate, the chairperson is king or queen, depending on if he is male or female. But Mr. President, shouldn't we have ground rules? Hindi ba tao din naman tayong lahat? Pilipino din naman tayong lahat eh. Hindi ba pwedeng hintayin niyo muna ang Pangulo bago kayo mag-speech? Nung nakita ko po na wala si Senator De Lima ngayon, inisip ko po na wag muna mag-speech. Ang problema po, Wednesday ngayon, bukas Thursday, tapos next week na po yung pagpunta ng Presidente. And anytime naman po, pwede naman kami siya mag-speech at sasagot ako. But the point, Mr. President, kahit wala siya, wala ako, we're only senators. We represent our people here in the Senate, but we do not represent our people in our country outside of the country in an official manner. We are representatives of the people, but we are not the representative. And in attending the international conference next week, the President will be representing our OFWs, our trade agreements, our pitches for tourism, will be representing our needs to the other countries, the needed funding for infrastructure. Our President will be representing the opposition and the administration all together. So, Mr. President, can't we be united when the President represents not his administration, but when he represents the whole country? Sir President, I'm not saying patayin natin ang hearing na to. Di ko po sinasabing wag bantayan. In fact, Mr. President, baka nga kailangan may permanent tayong committee just to monitor human rights, no, in the Senate. I will agree to that. But having said that, Mr. President, ayusin naman po natin na yung sumisigaw na human rights, gawin din niya. And this is my final point. Ano po ba pinaka-basic sa human rights? Hindi ba due process? Hindi ba si Eva at Adan, alam naman ng Diyos na kinain nila yung mansanas, pero sabi po ng Diyos sa kanila, Eva, Adan, ba't kayo nagtatago? Nagtanong muna ang Diyos eh. Pero alam niya na guilty. Pero yun po ang example parate sa law school ng due process. Tinanong muna. Bakit po? O edi nagturuan na. Sabi ni Adan, si Eva po nagbigay sa akin eh. Sabi naman ni Eva, ang ahas nagbigay sa akin. Nakapagpaliwanag po sila. Pero may due process. Tayo po, naghihiring pa lang, sinasabi na ni Chairman Gascon at ni Senator De Lima. Lastly po, sabi po ni Chairman Gascon, ang pangalan ng team nila na nag-iimbestiga sa mga pulis ay Team Rub Out. I think it was Senator Lacson, if I'm not mistaken, who pointed that out, and rightly so. And I thank Senator Lacson. Sipin mo naman po, pulis ka, kakatanggap ka ng sulat, kailangan ka ma-interview ng Team Rub Out. Wala ka pang ginagawa, guilty ka na. Team Rub Out, yun po ang pangalan. Taga-human rights kayo. Kung ang pulis siguro o kami dito sa Senado na hindi expert sa human rights ang magkamali, okay lang. Pero kayo sa human rights, yan ang trabaho nyo. Mr. President, hindi naman trabaho ng human rights lang isumbong ang violation sa human rights. Ang trabaho din ng human rights is to represent us to the world. That in our country, Filipinos respect human rights. If there are violations, tell me what country ang walang human rights violation. Anong bansa? Simula nung kay Cain and Abel at nagpinatay yung kapatid, meron ng human rights violation eh. Wala namang bansa po na walang human rights violation. Ang question po, may ginagawa ba tayo? Wala. Panuurin nyo po ang interviews nila sa CNN, interviews po, pati sa BBC po at sa iba. Pinalalabas wala tayong ginagawa, which I take exception to. Sir President, medyo humaba ang aking speech, pero ako'y nagpapasalamat sa inyong lahat. Ako'y humingi ng patnubay din. Alam ko lahat tayo gusto din magsalita sa issue na to. Pero let us act as one in the Senate in deciding certain important facts, including how do we help the police? How do we add their equipment? Paano natin pataasin ang sweldo nila? Pati ang bumbero, ang jail guards, pati po ang ating pong mga militar. Let us act together in saying, kailangan lahat ng hearing dito sa Senado fair. At lahat po ng chairman, walang bias. Although mahirap po mag-judge. Talagang pag inumpisahan natin, baka isa-isay na natin, mahirap naman po. But Mr. President, may I repeat my appeal. Baka naman pwedeng may gentleman's and gentlewoman's agreement tayo dito. Pag ang presidente nasa abroad at representing all of us, di ba? Let's take care of other matters muna. Pagbalik, tuloy ang ligaya, upakan ulit. That's democracy, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. God bless you. God bless us all.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. Majority Leader?
Mr. President, I wish to interpolate the gentleman from Taguig, but before that, Senator Cynthia Villar would like to have the floor for a manifestation concerning the speech of the gentleman.
Okay, so Senator Villar is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a manifestation on the mentioned GSP Plus. The GSP Plus is an action by the European Union giving us free tariff or lifting the tariff on 6,000 products of the Philippines being exported to the European Union. It came after the European Union lifted our yellow tag. Yung yellow tag po natin ay kung hindi tayo maipapasa yung ating amendment to the Fisheries Code that we allow illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in the Philippines. Kasi po, pag nag-red tag tayo, after the yellow tag, they will ban all the fisheries export to Europe, which amounts to 9 billion pesos. So, nung last year po, ipinasa po ng Senado yung ating amendment to the Fisheries Code of 1998 na pinahigpit po para mapigil ang illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. After that, the yellow tag was removed, and then they gave us the GSP Plus, which lifted the tariff on our 6,000 products na export to Europe. So, hindi ko po maisip na they will connect the GSP Plus to human rights violation. So, yun lang po ang gusto kong i-manifest, at I want to thank the Senate of the Philippines in the 16th Congress for passing the amendment to the Fisheries Code of 1998. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Villar, for that additional information. Senator Soto is recognized for interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished gentleman from Taguig yield to a few questions, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President. It will be a privilege to answer questions from our Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the gentleman for the well-prepared privilege speech. And I must admit that I have admiration for the gentleman for every time he opens up with a privilege speech. He opens up with a passage from the Bible. And I was reminded earlier of the passages mentioned by Senator Manny Pacquiao, Romans 13, and chapter 1 to 5, no, verses 1 to 5, and then Acts 25, verses 10 to 11. Let me just add mine for the perusal of the gentleman from Taguig. Luke 19:27, and if you're familiar with that, it says, "But those enemies which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me." Baka pwede mong idagdag ito sa mga nagagamit ninyo. Thank you for that. Now,
Thank you, Reverend Senator Tito Soto.
Thank you. I said well-crafted and then congratulations because I like the tagline above your presentation. You said there, no to drugs, yes to peace and order. Excellent. Because nationwide, I've been traveling, and every now and then I see these logos or these lines. They said, yes to God, no to drugs. You should not do that. Never should you use that. Because you cannot compare drugs to God. We should never compare drugs to God. Therefore, ito maganda, yung ginamit ni Senator Cayetano. No to drugs, yes to peace and order. So, congratulations for that, Mr. President. Now, going to my first question. Extrajudicial killings. There have been definitions during the public hearings of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights about the definition of extrajudicial killings. Iba-iba ho ang interpretasyon, iba-iba ang ano, no? May I ask you your opinion on the Odicta assassination? Are you familiar with the Melvin Odicta and Mrs. Odicta assassination in Iloilo, or from Iloilo, but assassinated somewhere in
Mr. President, may I
Batiklan? Yeah.
first thank you for the congratulations, and I use the verses to give glory to God, but also because whether we quote from the Bible, the Quran, or any holy book, as we believe in different religions, we believe in the principle, kaya natin kino-quote yan. And I thank you for the verse that you quoted. If you're mentioning, Mr. President, the case of the alleged drug lords who went to the DILG secretary, and then when they left, they rode a ferry, and as they were leaving the ferry, or
a few days after,
they were assassinated.
So, is that again charged to President Duterte? Is that extrajudicial killing?
If you will listen to Senator De Lima and to Chairman Gascon in general, all of that will be charged to him. Because their definition of extrajudicial killing, and listening to them when they name the numbers 2,000, kahit sinong mapatay na has anything to do with criminality. Let me put it this way, Senator Soto, our dear Majority Leader, Mr. President. In layman's speaking, extrajudicial, ano ba ibig sabihin ng extrajudicial? Labas sa korte. So any killing, not of natural death, na hindi in order ng korte, is extrajudicial killing. Ang problema sa human rights advocates at sa abroad, pag sinabi mong extrajudicial killing, ang impression nun, pinapayagan ng Estado. So if you ask me, are all of these shootouts, yung mga pinatay, drug lord to drug lord, in the generic sense, extrajudicial siya. But in the human rights definition, as Chairman Gascon quoted Philip Alston, hindi siya kasama kasi iniimbestigahan at kinakasuhan to. Meaning, ang pinag-uusapan po dito, state-sponsored ba yung extrajudicial killing o hindi? No? So, Mr. President, I do not believe that it's the DILG, the President, or the PNP who ordered them killed. What is a possible scenario? Ano ba ho nangyayari pag ang isang drug lord ay nagsumbong po sa police or sa DILG? Takot ang mga kasama niya na sila naman ang ikanta. This is usual in organized crime, Mr. President. Hindi ba yung sa mafia, no? So kung yung godfather ang pinakamataas, may consigliere yung kanyang overall advisor, yung bawat batalyon niya, merong capo regime. Pag nahuli mo yung singtaas ng capo regime, kaya na niyang isumbong yung godfather. So pag yung capo regime ay nag-report na sa DOJ nila or sa Attorney General, itinatago na yan. Bakit? Kung hindi, ang papatay sa kanila, hindi yung Estado. Ang papatay sa kanila, yung organisasyon. That's why, to my information, maraming susurrender ngayon for two purposes. Number one, to tell the police, we will cooperate. Huwag nyo kaming pagka kayo, halimbawa po yung iba sinabi, hindi nyo na kailangan ng warrant, pasukin nyo bahay namin. Kasi takot ng ekwentro eh. But number two, to also plea for their safety. Kasi pag kwinento na nila, saan nila kinukuha supply, sino kasama nila, etc., yun ang mapapatay. And a good example here, Senator Soto, and I'm sure you gave this example a lot of times when you were still Vice Mayor and head of the anti-drugs sa Quezon City, no? Hindi ba yung police, kung may ginagamit yan na pusher, pag nahuli yung pusher, siya mag-asikaso, makawala. Kasi kung hindi, kakanta siya eh. Pero kung ngayon, nakuha yung pusher, sumurrender, say, boss, wag niyo patayin. Sasabihin ko sa inyo kung sino protector ko, sino supplier ko, sino nagre-recycle. Eh, patay na yung police. So, minsan, yung police na madumi, siya na ang papatay mismo sa kanyang supplier or drug lord to drug lord. But that is not an act of the state. That is an act of a rogue policeman or of a rotten egg. Yung pong sinasabi ko na bakit si Chairman Gascon at si Senator De Lima, ganyan ang faulty generalization. Nung DOJ pa ho si Senator De Lima, pag may isang piskal po na tumanggap ng lagay, ibig ba sabihin ang buong DOJ po ay tumatanggap ng lagay? Ibig ba sabihin ang secretary tumatanggap ng lagay? Hindi po. Hindi naman po yung charge to Secretary De Lima. Bakit po ito? Charge to Duterte po lahat.
Yes, Mr. President, I will have to agree to most of what you said now. Yan namang sinasabi ninyong nagre-report. The report on the ground is different. Ang sinasabi po sa atin yan, and I speak as still the president of the Philippine Narcotic Enforcement Officers Association. No? I have been the leader of that group since our Inoa days. Nagre-report, susurrender, pagbalik, tira uli. Parang nagre-report lang para to lift the pressure.
I agree, Mr. President. Meron din pong ganun.
Oo, pero pagbalik, tira din eh. So really, this is a very difficult situation for the government, especially the Duterte administration that is really seriously bent on curtailing totally the drug problem, the drug menace. Now, I will have to offer a disclosure, no, because my next question is about the CHR. And my disclosure is that I've had 2 tiffs with that CHR already. Once when I was vice mayor, second when I was chairman of the Dangerous Drugs Board. My first tiff was when I was proposing in Quezon City a mandatory drug testing. Ewan ko kung bakit ayaw na CHR ng mandatory drug testing, kinistyon nila yun eh. Oo, nung araw, talagang antindi ng problema ko noon sa kanila. And then, pagdating ho ng Dangerous Drugs Board chairman ako, and we already incorporated in the law that there is mandatory drug testing, kine-question na naman. As a matter of fact, they question the mandatory drug testing for students, saka sa mga, naiintindihan ko yung sa mga students, pero sa workplace, bakit may questionin mo yun?
Well, Mr. President, if I may venture just a short comment or answer to that. Kasi po, yung evolution po ng human rights sa Europeans, yung values nila sa West ang ini-impose sa atin So, sumobra na rin po kasi yung kanilang individual rights at right to privacy. So, sa kanila, pagka hindi random, it's a violation of our rights. Pero sa atin po na Asians, na pamilya, na pag sinabi ng head ng family, sino nag-drug sa inyo, lahat kayo magpa-testing, it's within our culture So, it doesn't violate the individual rights, especially in the context of certain circumstances. For example, Mr. President, paano magiging violation pag pulis ka at mandatory? Pulis ka Kung sasabihin mo, buong Pilipinas, fishing expedition lahat, baka pwede mo sabihin, it's not a question of Western or Asian values, di ba? Pero halimbawa, sasabihin mo, Mr. President, militar at saka pulis. Hindi ba pwede magkaroon doon na hindi random kung hindi mandatory? Paano ka naman kampante sa pulis at saka sa militar or kahit sa politiko kung hindi mo alam na drug-free yung tao? So, I commiserate, Mr. President, and I understand your frustrations. You were trying to address a problem in your city, and you were trying to uphold the rights of innocent people, but the Commission on Human Rights in that case was a stumbling block rather than a organization that could help you find solutions to solve the problem.
Parang ang dating po sa akin human rights daw yung magdurog. Parang ganun ang dating sa akin na huwag kong pakikialaman kung gusto magdurog nila dahil human right nila yon. Okay lang yun kung siya lang mag-isa. Kaso, tignan nyo kung ilang libo ang napatay na rape ng mga user at na mga gumagamit ng droga. Ilan ang naapektuhan nila? Ilang buhay, ilang pamilya nasira nila? So, paano yun? Still, human rights nila yung magdurog?
To your point, Mr. President, okay lang sabihin mo kung private sila lang, sila may sariling negosyo, walang maapektuhan. Pero paano kung teacher siya at ang ina-handle po niya may mga bata? Paano po kung police siya, women's desk, ang ina-handle po niya mga na-abuso or victims or against violence against women and children, di ba? Tapos durog sila. Wala tayong karapatan na siguraduhin na ang mga naglilingkod sa bayan ay drug-free. I again agree with you, Mr. President.
Incidentally, Mr. President, there are thousands of crimes committed by persons under the influence of drugs. Were they investigated by the CHR?
Wala,
Your knowledge?
Wala po akong knowledge as of now, pero at least po sa public pronouncements, parang ang focus nila parate kapag law enforcers or alagad ng batas or state actors ang kumilos, doon nila pinapasok na human rights. Except for yung sa SAF 44, I think, that they investigated, hindi masyadong na-highlight kung iniimbestigahan nila yung violations of, halimbawa po, sa mga polis ngayon na napatay, yung violation ng kanilang karapatan na pinatay sila ng mga drug lords.
So the 7-year-old girl that was raped and killed by a marijuana addict, high on marijuana, okay lang sa CHR yan?
No knowledge as of now. I'm sure po na hindi okay sa kanila, but I do not know if it is...
I mean, investigation-wise, no? I don't mean okay
Yes.
sa kanila na pwede yun. I don't mean that.
Tama
no?
po.
What I mean is baka hindi kailangan imbestigahan. Hindi sila kailangan mag-step in. Ganun po ba?
Ang akin pong impression, but I may be wrong, Mr. President, is parang hindi nila sakop yon kasi ang pumatay ay hindi naman alagad ng batas. But I may be wrong, and that was one of the questions that I would have wanted to ask the CHR, except that limited talaga ang time sa investigasyon na uubos between Senator De Lima at yung witnesses. Para kasing siya na yung nagpre-present ng witness, siya pa yung nagcro-cross-examine, siya pa yung nagpre-present. So, naubusan talaga ng oras lahat ng iba.
Ito naman pong going to still on the issue of human rights. Itong United Nations. Lately they were stepping in dito sa issue sa Pilipinas on the issue of drug war at saka United Nations pumapasok. Human rights din ba ang ang issue?
Mr. President, may I make that clarification because even in CNN last night, I heard that na sinabi the UN stepped in. It is not true that the UN is stepping in. Kasi pag sinabi mong UN, you're talking about the General Assembly or an official act of the UN. Nag-comment po ang Secretary General nila. Ang problema po, during the time na nag-comment po ang ating Pangulo at nag-comment si Secgen Ban Ki-moon, hindi pa ho administrasyon niya. So yung representative po natin sa UN ay hindi nag-file ng protest. May mga nakausap po ako sa diplomatic corps, pati po sa ambassador, at sabi nila, pag nangyari ito sa bansa nila, automatic yun, magpro-protest sila at hindi sila papayag na sa record. Why? Because wala pa naman investigasyon na hawak si Secgen Ban Ki-moon. Ang hawak niya lang yung news reports at nag-comment na siya. No? Pangalawa po, yung tinatawag pong rapporteur or yung pong sa English reporter. Kaya nga po reporter, sila po ay mag-iimbestiga, then they will report to the UN. And then their report shall be part of the record. Si Alston po ay nag-report talaga, nag-imbestiga. Ito pong mga binabanggit ngayon, hindi pa ho nag-iimbestiga yan. Nagko-comment yan based on the reports. That's why ang aking pakiusap sa ating mga kapatid sa media, madalas sabihin nyo, huwag kaming balat sibuyas, huwag kaming magalit mga politiko, ginagawa lang ang aming trabaho. Ang pakiusap ko sa inyo pabalik, pag ginamit nyo po ang salitang summary killings, extrajudicial killings, vigilante, kill list, etc., please do that. Be sensitive din kasi ang nagbabasa ng dyaryo nyo, ang nanonood ng inyong news report, hindi lang Pilipino, hindi lang sa Pilipinas. Sa abroad, binabasa din. At sa Pilipino, we take it in the common sense meaning, extrajudicial. Pero sa abroad, lalo sa Europe at sa US, pag nabasa ang mga salitang ito, ang dating sa kanila, no, human rights violation. Kaya nag-react yung UN. But there is no official statement or intercession or intervention by the United Nations. And you know, I will be taking that up as chairman of the committee, as our chairman or your chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, sapagkat I think our ambassadors and especially our representative to the UN has to be more aggressive in reminding the UN that may kanya-kanya tayong kultura at paraan ng pagsasalita. At tignan nila ang aksyon ng ating Pangulo at ng ating mga kababayan rather than yung the way we talk. Kasi nausok, Mr. President, masyado yung politically correct eh. So kumbaga, pag may nasabi kang hindi politically correct, babanatan ka agad ng mga aktivista sa Europe at sa US na hindi naman natin ginagawa yung pabalik sa kanila. So there are things that have to be worked out, Mr. President, and thank you for Majority Leader for bringing that up. But to clarify, no, pag nasa headline natin, UN, ganito, UN, parang ako, pag sinabi kong mali ang ginagawa ni Mayor ganito, pag nilagay mo sa dyaryo, Senate, censures, Mayor ganito, mali po yun. Dahil si Allan Cayetano lang po yun, isa lang ako sa 24. At kahit po 24 tayong pumirma, pag hindi pa natin in-approve sa plenary,
Correct.
Hindi pa po aksyon ng Senado yun.
Correct. Thank you very much. Well, I'm glad you clarified that issue on the United Nations because I almost went into another issue concerning the United Nations and whether just going back to Singapore, one final point, Mr. President. Is there a Commission on Human Rights in Singapore?
Hindi ko po alam, Mr. President, but alam ko na marami silang policies na nag-work na severely criticized ng human rights advocates at ng sa West, no? At pinipilit yung values ng West sa kanilang bansa. No?
I ask because, for one, I know for a fact that in Singapore, when a person is found to be a drug dependent, confirmed drug dependent, he will undergo rehabilitation and the entire family. Ganun magparehab doon, pati pamilya, rehab. Hindi yung person lang concerned.
Which, Mr. President, is an Asian value. Although Western people love their family, yung concept natin ng clan ng pamilya, ibang-iba talaga. Number two, Mr. President, hindi po natin sinasabi na hindi importante human rights. Ang sinasabi nga natin, pag ikaw ay sumunod sa batas, dapat walang violation ng batas, ikaw man ay kriminal o pulis. Ang parati lang sinasabi ng ating Pangulo at yung experience niyo po sa CHR, minsan, ginagamit pa ho ng mga kriminal o ginagamit ng gumagawa ng masama yung concept of human rights to shield them from liability or investigation. But we are not saying here that we do not respect human rights. We're not saying here that it's not important. In fact, that's why we put it in our Constitution that meron independent commission on human rights. Ang sinasabi po lang natin, maglagay sila sa ayos. Hindi po yung gagamitin sa politika or they will latch on an idea of a certain interpretation of human rights to the detriment of the whole country.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to thank the gentleman for yielding to some of my questions. If there is no other member
President,
who wishes
before
to...
that,
Yes.
Majority Leader, may I just emphasize because we often talk about drug dependents or users. Hindi po natin sinasabi na lahat ng users po ay kriminal o nagiging kriminal. In fact po, yung ginagamit ngayon na PNP na 3 million, di ba? Iniiba po natin ang addict sa user. Kasi pag nag-umpisa ka pa lang, user ka pa lang. Addiction, if I'm not mistaken, is a medical term, no? Meron ng certain degree of dependence on drug para maging addict. And then, yung tendency sa criminality, dalawa po yan. One, dati ka ng masama, talaga lang lumakas ang loob mo sa droga. Or pangalawa, dati kang mabuting tao, pero nasira na ulo sa droga. And that takes time to happen. That's why our President is saying, before it happens, i-rehab na natin ito. Let me clarify that because baka ang dating po sa pamilya ng mahigit 3 milyon na nag-use ng drugs ay walang puso o malasakit ang ating gobyerno o tayo po, Mr. Majority Leader, nagsasalita dito. In fact, baliktad, ang malasakit natin sa kanila. Dahil biktima din naman ang tingin natin sa user. But once they start selling so that they can continue their habit and once they start criminal activity, hindi nila pwedeng sabihin biktima lang sila kasi nang bibiktima na sila eh. At the start, biktima sila. Di ba? So, kung ako na-hold up, araw-araw, wag naman mangyari, naubos pera mo, biktima ka. Pero if I start na mang-hold up din ako para makabawi ako, criminal na rin ako. So let me put that on record, Mr. President, that you know, we are not putting in one lump sum or in one category the different kinds of dependencies. No, there's a science for that, and that's why we want more money, more resources, more help to get rid of this addiction, Mr. President.
I thank you for that clarification, Mr. President, because that's also one thing that I'm surprised about, that I wonder why other people don't realize it. Drug testing, they should not be worried about drug testing, Mr. President. Even the CHR before, I keep on telling them, nagdidebate kami nung araw nung DDB chair ako eh. Drug testing, even if you test positive, it doesn't mean you're a drug dependent. You must undergo a confirmatory test before you can be declared a drug dependent. Kaya wag silang matakot sa drug testing. Ewan ko kung bakit kabadong-abado sila kung pagpapadrug test yung workplace or yung wherever. But of course, you know, the nowadays, you know, the regular drug testing is for marijuana and shabu. But the real drug testing that should be conducted is the 5-assay test, drug test, which includes everything: cocaine, nobain, lahat ng droga. But then again, if you test positive, you must undergo a confirmatory test to prove that you are a drug dependent. Otherwise, you tested positive. That's all.
Mr. President, just a point of information. Singapore has no National Human Rights Commission like the CHR, but they have an interministerial committee that oversees human rights. Second point, Mr. President, it's so interesting every time I listen to Senator Soto about drugs, but that's my point precisely. If the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, no, also took up these other aspects, no, paano makatulong sa prosecutorial system, paano po ang sa drug dependency, kung tinanong dun sa byuda at sa mga anak na bakit kayo nasa droga, ano bang pwede, okay lang po sa akin eh. Pero para po ba tayong nag-drawing ng target tapos nilagay natin dun sa pula, sa bullseye, si Duterte? Ganun po ang nakikita kong takbo ng committee. But I may be wrong. But ask the public and ask our colleagues, Mr. President. And I don't think it reflects well on the Senate.
Thank you for that information. I think that is a very good idea. We should ponder on a committee in the Parliament, you know, just in case the federalism program of the Senate President and President Duterte work out, and there is a Parliament, you know, the Committee on Human Rights could be included in that Parliament, perhaps. Just an idea. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
With the permission of the two gentlemen, can I ask a point of clarification directed at our expert on, what's the title, sir? Expert on drug proliferation,
drug production, eradication.
Sir, at the point when a person is using or enjoying illegal drugs, is he or is he not violating the law?
He is a criminal, Mr. President. That is the problem with this issue. The problem of dangerous drugs. This is the only crime in the world where the criminal is a victim and the victim is a criminal. There is no other such crime.
And then, let us say, a few days later on, he's tested and he tests positive. At that particular point, he is not violating the law anymore, right?
When he tested positive, he was not.
Yes.
When he was using, he was.
Yes, so that's why there is really nothing to fear about having yourself tested.
Yes.
Because whatever be the result, for as long as when the result comes out, you are not actually using or enjoying illegal drugs, then you are not committing a crime at that particular point.
Correct, precisely. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator Soto.
So with that, Mr. President, I move to refer the privileged speech of the gentleman from Taguig to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Mr. President. And as a matter of fact, I am tempted, no, so I will leave it to the wisdom of the gentleman. I'm tempted to refer it to the Committee on Rules.
I agree with you.
Because he is questioning, the gentleman from Taguig is questioning
Can I contribute
President.
my own ideas? I made some notes of from the speech of Senator Cayetano. He asks the question, who should chair the hearing on extrajudicial killings, especially if the chair is decided already? I think that's one of the points raised by Senator Cayetano. He says that the chairman should be neutral. That's why I doubt if the overall substance of the speech is a proper subject matter of the Committee on Public Order. I think it should be more on the Rules Committee.
Sir President,
Senator
may I
Cayetano.
thank you and the Majority Leader to be sensitive to this issue, because if you referred it to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, you will be creating an injustice and violating my human rights. Having said that, Mr. President, there is nothing wrong with being biased, prejudiced, in a sense, when you are an advocate here in the Senate. So if I'm biased or for the poor and prejudice against, let's say, oligarchs, and we are creating a we are creating a body to make sure that there is no unlevel playing field, no? Or, for example, Mr. President, if you are a human rights advocate, you of course tend, no, to look beyond the legal and the what's happening in the big picture, and you tend to focus on the human right aspect. I have no problem with that. I'm not saying that Senator De Lima per se is doing anything wrong by focusing on human rights and advocating that. What I'm saying is that it's a deadly combination to be chairman and an advocate at the same time. You have to choose. So if you want to chair that hearing, because Mr. President, at the start of the hearing, she made it clear that they will be following the rules of investigation in aid of legislation. So this is not a hearing, an ordinary hearing of the committee on a certain bill. It's an investigation in aid of legislation. So if you cannot be unbiased in chairing the committee, how will the facts come in? No? And remember, the chairman or chairperson is king or queen in this Senate. But again, Mr. President, I hesitated and thought twice about bringing this up because we can accuse each other in any hearing of this. No? But it is consuming our national media. It is consuming the goodwill of the Philippines in the international media. Instead of ang headline, safe na ang Pilipinas, biyahe na. Di ba? Or, wow Philippines, if I can quote Senator Gordon, or it's more fun in the Philippines, ang nasa headlines, patayan sa Pilipinas, which is not an accurate picture of what is happening in our streets. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm not saying walang napapatay, pero hindi naman totoo na hindi ka safe sa kalye at sa trabaho mo ngayon. In fact, matatawa ka sa example na to, Mr. President, pero yung sa Pokemon, punta kayo ng Luneta. Kahit gabi, ang dami ng tao kasi they feel safe already. They don't, hindi katulad dati na talagang pag magulang ka at hindi pa nagte-text o wala pa sa bahay mo yung anak mo, nag-aalala ka eh. Ngayon, there's a sense, no, of security that I want to communicate. We want as a Senate to communicate to the rest of the world. So thank you for being sensitive on that point. No?
Thank you, Mr.
Majority
President.
Leader?
So, let me amend my motion, Mr. President. I move that the privileged speech of the gentleman from Taguig be referred to the Committee on Rules.
There is a motion to refer to the Committee on Rules the speech made by Senator Cayetano. Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to...
Mr. President?
Yes.
Senator
Mr. President,
Zubiri
mine is
wishes
just
to be
a quick,
recognized.
it's not an interpolation because I completely agree with the gentleman from Taguig on all his points. Mine is just a manifestation of support that we asked the chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights to defer the hearing on a later time, on a later date, in support of the President and his trip to the ASEAN Summit. That way we can show unity even if we have different political colors. Let's not destroy the Philippines in that way by coming out with unnecessary hearings. I so move. I mean, that's my manifestation for the record, Mr. President.
Mr. President, just on that point.
Thank you, Senator Zubiri.
Mr. President, just on that point, some senators might object, and I don't want to put political color, but if you remember when we handled the budget, we agree that no hearings can be had while we're doing the budget. para nakafocus tayong lahat sa budget. So it's a matter of consensus. If we have a consensus that in certain international engagements where the President is with the head of states, we do not conduct hearings that would shed a bad light on the country or the President, then I think it would be a good rule. Remember, we never know when we're in the opposition or in the administration. And I will keep that rule, not only for President Duterte, but for any president. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator.